with Michael Hogan, or for Limerick for that matter. That's his statue out at the end of the street here at the parade. And he was one of the most famous characters that ever graced our beautiful city. Born in 1832, but others claim it was 1828. And even a distant relative claims of his claims it was 1826. But 1832 to 1899 is considered to be the years of his life. He was one of 6 children born to Arthur Hogan and Mary Nolan in Thomond, which is on the far side of the river, for those of you not familiar with the city. And he was born in a place called the New Road. And his father was a wheelwright with Stein's whiskey distillery, which was over there where O'Dwyer's Villas houses now stand. It was a 6-acre site. And his father was also a musician. And he actually made and played tin whistles for our music interest here as well. However, the bard was not destined to follow his father's footsteps, but he did have a creative wing to his life, if you like. And he was no scholar at school, dropping out of the Christian Brothers, and I'm not going to bring in any poetry here because we have poets here, but he considered himself to be the funniest fool that ever graced a Christian school. Anyway, he got a job in Russell's Mills out at the Park Canal, and it was there that he met a clerk from the company by the name of William Doyle, who saw his potential as a writer because he wanted to write poetry. And he told him that he should put his mind to it. And the next thing he went away, he left the mills and he started writing poetry. And his first book was published around this time, The Light of Munster. And his focus was on King Cora and Brian Boru, famous people, not from legend, but from fact, from north of the Shannon here and west of the Shannon, east of the Shannon. So he had no luck selling his book, despite the fact of going all around Munster. So he went back to work in the mills. And in 1858 he fell in love and he married a lady called Anne Lynch, and he came to live here in Nicholas Street. But in the intervening years, he had lived in just about every basement around the place because he had struggled to survive. He had no children with Anne Lynch, and very little is known about them, about their lives together. But he had a burning ambition to write, and he got published in just about everything, the Limerick Leader and the Munster News, you name whatever publications were around at that time. But he was yet to reach the pinnacle of his ambition as a writer, and he befriended Sir Peter Tate, who we would consider Limerick to be the prince of the Shetland Islands, who actually established the Limerick Clothing Factory, and he served as mayor of the city on 3 occasions, and he came with nothing and he left with more than what he came with. But he befriended Michael Hogan, and the reason he befriended him was because Hogan could connect with anybody. He had a great people way about him. So he was working on probably his most famous publication, The Lays and Legends of Thomond, but he couldn't afford to get it printed. So Sir Peter Tate gave him the £30, if I only could get stuff printed for £30 today, £30. But he had great difficulty getting his publication printed because the printers did not like the content. But he eventually found a printer who agreed to print it, but would not agree to bind it, again because of the content. And it was originally published in 1861, and a second edition was published in Dublin in 1867, and the final edition was published in 1880. In 1886, he went to America for 3 years with his wife. The only luggage that he brought himself, apart from what the wife brought, were 40 copies of Lays and Legends of Thomond. And after 3 years, he came back to Limerick, and he got a job with Limerick Corporation, maintaining the bank here in Kings Island for £1 per week. He is most famous, of course, for Drunken, Thady and the Bishop's Lady, which I think we're going to hear, 186 lines, and also Sean Scoob, and he also wrote a poem about the man who cursed the people of Limerick, Saint Munchin, in the year 630. We may hear about him as well. Anyway, the Bar died in 1899. He had fallen into bad health. He was 67, which was considered old age at that time. Now we'd say you're only a young one if you're 67. But he was buried in St. Lawrence's Cemetery, and if you go in the main entrance of the older cemetery and turn right and go down about 10 graves, you'll actually find the grave. And it was vandalised in the 1980s. It was one of about 150 graves that were vandalised, but it was restored afterwards. Anyway, that's just a little bit on the Bard. More information on him tomorrow. Right. Thank you very much, Dominic. Thank you.
It were not for the last season, we grow the rushes of, we grow the rushes of, the sweetest hours that ever I spent was spent among the last season. The one you raised may riches chase, and riches still may fly them home. And when at last they catch them fast, their hearts can never enjoy them home. We grow the rushes of, we grow spent among the lassies. Oh, now nature swears the lovely dears, unnoticed when she glasses. Oh, her apprentice hand she tried on man, and then she met the lassies. Oh, green grow the rushes. Oh, green grow the rushes. Oh, the sweetest hours that ever I spent was spent among the lassies. Grow the rushes, oh, green grow the rushes, oh, the sweetest hours that ever I spent were spent among the lassies.
I must say I'm very, very proud to be from the parish. Born and bred down in what is Long Lane. Our house was where, was where the absolute hell is. Hotel. Right, that's where I lived, where I was born and was brought up. And Mae Leonard, she said she had a lovely childhood, which doesn't augur well for a writer. And I can say the very same thing. I had a wonderful, wonderful childhood. But because of the fact that the Bard has been honoured here tonight, I just love his poem. You can see how old this book is. This belonged to my father's uncle. But I love the bit where he honours the achievements of the women of Limerick at the Battle of Limerick. And just a little bit of it here, where the women come to the battle. Can you hear me?
Yes. Very clear.
So, but hark, what deafening cheer, what new war cry peals through the town and sounds along the sky. What fresh reinforcement swells the deadly tide, spring on the foe and bursts from every side. Limerick, behold thy daughters proud and fair, like armed angels flying to war. They saw their husbands, brothers, sweethearts all fly from the ramparts and desert the wall, and dashing forth mid streams of fire and blood, attacked the foe and checked the march of blood. And the very last 4 lines then says, Limerick is free, peal out St. Mary's bell, o'er plain and hill the joyful anthem swells, immortal honour to her daughter's pride, that smashed the foe and turned the scale of fight. So you would be very proud to be from Limerick when you hear that from the Bard. And I'm just kind of going to deviate slightly from poetry. I do this thing, Thought for the Day, in the early morning. If you're up at 6:15, you get it on RTE. But everything I do comes back to Limerick, because you can take the woman out of Limerick, but you can't get the Limerick out of the woman. Am I saying that wrong?
Yeah, no.
Yeah. This is just a little story. She was an ordinary woman, my Auntie Kathleen. That's how she would describe herself. She was extraordinary without even trying. My Auntie Kathleen ran a little corner shop in uptown Limerick. It was an area close to St. Joseph's Church, and there were hard times all round her. One of her regular customers was Frank McCord's mother, Angela. You know the book. Angela's ashes. Angela would take refuge in the shop from her pitiful life, and remained for hours chatting and telling stories. I met Frank McCord on his book tour of Ireland, and he told me, "Your aunt fed us when we were hungry." Yes, Auntie Kathleen was always there with a helping hand and buckets full of sympathy. She was the youngest of my mother's family, and whereas my mum was an exacting perfectionist, Kathleen was the complete opposite. She was never in time for anything, usually because she met someone along the way who needed a cluish éisteachta, a listening ear. She was a serial funeral goer. She sympathised and wept with the bereaved. Her husband was an army man and was happy to make her happy. He collected her from the shop at closing time and carried her home on the crossbar of his bike. She always wore a little glass pendant on a silver chain around her neck containing a first-class relic of St. Gerard Macella, the patron saint of Craiglan's mother. But he didn't work any miracles for her. She went to console a distressed lady in the church one day who was having a difficult pregnancy. Kathleen gave her the precious relic, and the result was a perfect delivery. After that, there were other women who were given the relic. It always returned to Auntie Kathleen. In fact, my mother wore it while she was carrying me. I don't tell anybody this. This is why I was baptised Macella. Auntie Kathleen sustained a serious leg injury when she tripped over a broken pedestal in St. Joseph's Church one day. The parish priest came to her house with a cheque to cover the medical expenses. Auntie Kathleen cashed the cheque and put the money into the poor box. Auntie Kathleen's husband passed away too soon, and my mum felt it her duty to feed her. She came on Sundays for dinner. Always late, of course, but very welcome. She was an avid film fan, and during those dinners she entertained us royally with a story of whatever film she had seen that week. Tears would run down her face in an emotional telling, and we had to bite our lips to smother our laughter. She was my godmother, and I loved her. My Auntie Kathleen was no ordinary woman. There is no such thing as an ordinary woman. We are extraordinary, every one of us. It's one of those nights when I can't sleep. Why? I wish I knew. It just happens that when it does, I try not to twist and turn. I remain absolutely still and stare at the ceiling. Then I reach for the comfort of poetry. I lie in my bed and I hear in the street the people passing by. The slow, the quick, the limping feet, and I see a bit of the sky. And there's an Irish version of those lines that I sort of half remember. A gwyn na hi a cosha mead, na cosha ag shul, a rea mead, ni eka mead, ni fisca will a court. It's the poetry I learned in St. Mary's Primary School. Easy, understandable, rhyming and rhythmic. Of course I can't remember all the lines, but if I falter in the middle of a verse, I don't let it bother me. I move on to another. I will arise and go now and go to Innisfree. What's that noise? Is someone knocking on the door? Is there anybody there? Said the traveller, knocking on the moonlit door, and his horse in the silence champed on the grasses of the forest's ferny floor. Walter de la Mare. I never get to the end of that one. Time to move on to the next one. The curfew tolls the knell of parting day. The lowing herd winds slowly o'er the lea. The ploughman homeward plods his weary way and leaves the world to darkness and to me. What's that scratching? A mouse? A rat? I sigh. Nothing I can do about it now. Calm down, calm down. Think of another few lines. Nice and light, please. Tá tír na ógur cúla tí tá tír all in trína céile, lucht ceir cosig siúl na slí gan róga ort na léine, gan béarla a cup na gaelga. For me, it's not just the poetry. In St. Mary's School, there were teachers and nuns who shaped my life, and honest to God, I don't think I ever thanked them. I do now. as the strains of Brahms' lullaby slides into my mind and my eyelids begin to droop. Roses whisper good night, leaves them we lie, while asleep in the dew. They hide from our view. When the dawn breaketh through, God will wake them and you. When the dawn breaketh through, God will wake them and you. That's not In our house there was always a song, and my father played piano badly, but played it. And the nights down at Drunkard, the Christmas nights, did anybody remember them? Anybody here remember nights in a Drunkard boat club? Do you?
No. Never house.
I'm that old. Yeah. When some nights when I'm sitting on my own in the kitchen, I live in Naas in County Kildare now, and actually I married a Limerick hurler, and he won a minor medal with Limerick in 1958, is it?
Yeah.
58, 1958? Yeah, I'm very proud of him, and he'd be raging if you heard me talking about him. Anyway, when I'm sitting in the kitchen at night, do you ever sort of hear the fridge might click on? And maybe out in the chillers room, the washing machine might come on. And this is what I hear, the old refrain. Night in my kitchen, and my washing machine is singing sweet songs of the past. Songs from the not so long ago, from my mother's time, innocent and dreamlike. I often think of home, when I am all alone and far away. I hear her singing, my mother at the kitchen sink, my father's soft baritone harmonizing. I sing an old refrain, for it recalls to me a bygone day. Tonight my fridge is humming along to that refrain, never missing a heartbeat. For it recalls, it recalls to me, it takes me back again to meadows fair, where sunlight's golden stream sing everywhere. My childhood joys came back to me. Come on.
It was my mother's song. It was my mother.
It was my mother taught me how to sing.
I have it in a poem as well.
As long as I can sing, D-O-E. Oh, thank you very much. Sit down. Yeah, I'm been allowed to sit down.
My name is John Wright. I'll have your ear only a while. I left my dear home in Ireland. 'Twas death, starvation, or exile. And when I got to America, it was my duty to go. Enter the army and slog across Texas, join in the war against Mexico. 'Twas there in the pueblos and hillsides I saw the mistake I had made. A part of a conquering army with the morals of a bearded maid. Amongst all those poor dying Catholics, screaming children, the burning stench of it all, myself and 200 Irishmen decided to answer the call. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied, and we formed the St. Patrick's Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. marched beneath the green flag of St. Patrick, emblazoned with earring overall. Bright with the harp and the shamrock, the Libertad para Republica. Out amongst all those poor dying Catholics, screaming children, the burning stench of it all, myself and 200 Irishmen decided to answer the call. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom alive, and we formed the St. Patrick's Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We fought them in Matamoros, while the volunteers were raping the nuns. In Monterey and Cerigordo, we fought on as Ireland's sons. We were the red-headed fighters for freedom, with these brown-skinned women and men. Side by side we fought against tyranny, I dare say we do it again. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied, and we formed the St. Patrick's Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We fought them in 5 major battles. Should have must go was the last. Overwhelmed by the cannons from Boston, we fell after each mortar blast. Most of us died on that hillside, in the service of the Mexican state, far away from our occupied homeland. We were heroes and victims of fate. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied, and we formed the St. Patrick's Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick's Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side.
I'm afraid I'm not going to do anything on the bar at the moment. I think there's other people here that are really much better at that than I am. This is a piece I came across. Actually, it was a piece my late father, Lord West, used to do, and he brought tears to our eyes with it, and I hope I can do the same for you. The wind was a cloud of darkness among the gusty trees. The moon was a ghostly gallon tossed upon cloudy seas. The road was ribboned with moonlight over the purple moor, and the highwayman came riding. The highwayman came riding up to the old inn door. He had a French cocked hat on his forehead, and a bunch of lace at his chin, a coat of the claret velvet, and breeches of brown doeskin. Fitted with never a wrinkle, and his boots were up to the thigh. He rode with a jewel twinkle, his pistol was a twinkle, his rapier hilt a twinkle, under the jewelled sky. He clattered over the cobbles and clanged in the darkened yard. He tapped with his whip on the shutters, but all was locked and barred. He whistled a tune to the window, and who should be waiting there but the landlord's black-eyed daughter, Bess, the landlord's daughter, plaiting a dark red love knot into her long black hair. But dark in that dark hole in the yard, a stable wicket creaked, where Tim, the ostler, listened. His face was white and peaked. His eyes were hollows of madness. He had hair like Mowley hay. But he loved the landlord's daughter, the landlord's red-lipped daughter, and dumb as a dog he listened, and he heard the robber say, "One kiss, my brunny sweetheart, I'm after a prize tonight, and I shall be back with the yellow gold before the morning light. Yet if they press me sharply and harry me through the day, then look for me by moonlight, watch for me by moonlight. I'll come to thee by moonlight, though hell should bar the way." He rose upright in his stirrups. He scarce could reach her hand. She loosened her hair in her casement, and his face burnt like a brand as the black cascade of perfume came tumbling over his breast, and he kissed its waves in the moonlight. Oh, sweet black waves in the moonlight. Then he tugged on his rein in the moonlight, and he galloped away to the west. He did not return in the dawning. It did not return at noon, but out of the tawny sunset, before the rise of the moon, when the road was a gypsy's ribbon, looping the purple moon, a red coat troop came marching, marching, marching. King George's men came marching up to the old inn door. They said no word to the landlord, but they drank his ale instead. They grabbed his daughter and bound her to the foot of her narrow bed. Two of them knelt at her casement, with muskets by their side. There was death at every window, and hell at one dark window, for Bess could see from her casement the road that he would ride. They had tied her up to attention, with many a sniggering jest, with a musket bound beside her, and its muzzle beneath her breast. Now he could watch, and they kissed her, and she heard the doomed man say, "Look for me by moonlight, watch for me by moonlight, I'll come to thee by moonlight, though hell should bar the way." She twisted her hands behind her, but all the knots held good. She writhed her hands till her fingers were wet with sweat or blood. She strove and strained in the darkness, and the hours crawled by like years, till on the stroke of midnight, cold on the stroke of midnight, the tip of one finger touched it. The trigger at last was hers. The tip of one finger touched it. She strove no more for the rest. Up she stood to attention, with that muzzle beneath her breast. She would not risk her hearing. She would not strive again, for the road lay blank in the moonlight, bare and blank in the moonlight, and the blood of her veins in the moonlight throbbed to her love's refrain. Clop, 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 in the distance, horse hooves ringing clear. Clop, 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 clop. Had they heard them? Were they deaf that they did not hear? Down the ribbon of moonlight, over the brow of the hill, the highwayman came riding, riding, riding. The redcoats looked to their priming. She stood up straight and still. Clot-clot in the frosty silence, clot-clot in the echoing night. Nearer he came and nearer, her face was like a light. Her eyes grew wide for a moment, then she took one last deep breath, and her finger moved in the moonlight. Her musket shattered the moonlight, shattered her breast in the moonlight, and she warned him with her death. Away he turned to the west, for he did not know who stood, with her head bowed o'er that musket, drenched in her own red blood. Not till the dawn he heard it, and his face grew grey to hear how Bess, the landlord's daughter, the landlord's black-eyed daughter, had watched for her love in the moonlight and died in the darkness there. But still a winter's night to say, when the wind is in the trees, and the moon's a ghostly galleon tossed upon cloudy seas, and the road's a ribbon of moonlight over the purple moor, a highwayman was riding, riding, riding. I think I left out of her, so I'll go back for it. Back, I forgot his verse, I know that, no. Back he turned like a madman, screeching a curse to the sky, with the white road smoking behind him and his rapier brandished high. Blood red with his spurs in the golden noon, wine red with his velvet coat, when they shot him down on the highway, down like a dog on the highway, and he lay in his blood on the highway, with a bunch of lace at his throat. Now I can go back to that bit I was on. But still, for winter's night to say, when the wind is in the trees, and the moon's a ghostly galleon tossed upon cloudy seas, and the road's a ribbon of moonlight over the purple moor, a highwayman comes riding, riding, riding. A highwayman comes riding up to the old inn door. He clatters over the cobbles, he clangs in the darkened yard, he taps with his whip on the shutters, but all is locked and barred. He whistles a tune to the window, and who should be waiting there but the landlord's black-eyed daughter, Bess, the landlord's daughter, plaiting a dark red love knot into her long black hair.
I was a frog in Aristophanes' frogs, and this is the line, and then it goes into James Joyce was very much influenced by Aristophanes, and so I'm going to play a Greek tune after that, written by fella from Ballyfair. So it's a mixture. But we are the musical frogs. We live in the marshes and bogs. Sweet as our hymns, we sing as we swim. And on festival days we sing to the praise of the genie and God. Don't think a dog that the multitude throng to the sound of our song. How he fell with the rolling and rumbling, curled up like Lord Oliver Cromwell at the foot of the magazine wall, on Calmet. He was a fan of all things, fought two bottles, slow coaches and electric contraceptives for the populace, mares mint for the 6-7 price on every week, open air love and religious reform, so idiots and fun. He was one time our king of the castle, now he's kicked about like a rotten now parsonage, and be Green Street if he sent the order of his worship to the penal jails of Mountjoy, jail him with joy. We had chops, chairs, chicken pox, chewing gum and china chambers. Fought us all the brave sons of Scandinavia, we buried them down in Oxman's town, along with the devil in the days, the deaf and dumb days, and all their remains. Or a wife says you couldn't he manage it all, go baby, fine dairy, man darling, like a bumping bull in the castle, he's all his butter is in his heart, his butter is in his heart. He was jellying the Wellington's monument and uproarious slip at the puddles when some walking in on the back stops of his omnibus, and he got his dead fusiliers, his rents in arrears, give him 6 years. And a sweet bad look to the waves washed up in Ireland, the hoop of the Hammerfell Vikings, and Gall's course today, that plan of ace on the black and tan man of war, in Dublin's bar and little town. Now all the king's men are his horses, couldn't resurrect these corpses, and there's no true spell in Connacht or hell, able to get Trump elected again. I just wrote the last line myself.
So, just on one thing, there was a little piece in the end of the 3/4 the way through where Limerick's heroes fell and fought. He refers to a battle in Norman times when the old wooden bridge before Thomond Bridge had a drawbridge, and there was an assault made on the city gate, and the drawbridge opened, and the guys coming behind pressed the guys ahead, a lot of them fell into the river. Way back in old God's time, but Hogan always introduced these little things into his poems. But back to Thady. And I have my prompter ready for guess the little grey sentence. Before the year of '98 decided Ireland's wayward fate, when laws of death and transportation were served like banquets through the nation, but let that pass. The tale I dwell on has naught to do with Red Rebellion, although it was a glorious ruction and nearly wrought our foes' destruction. There lived and died in Limerick City a dame of fame. Ah, what a pity that dames of fame do live and die and never know for what or why. Some say her maiden name was Brady, while others say she was a Grady. But they never choke these contradictions, for truth is murdered with such fictions. It's true she lived, it's true she died, it's true she was a bishop's bride. But for herself it doesn't matter to whom she had been wife or daughter. Whether a Brady or O'Grady, she lived the most ungodly lady, spending her reverend lordship's treasures, chasing the world's evil pleasures, in love with suppers, cards and balls, and the luxurious sin of festive halls, where flaming hearts and flaming wine invite the passions all to dine. She died. Whether her actions were rewarded in heaven or hell recorded, we know not, but her time was given without a thought to hell or heaven. Her days and nights were spent in mirth. She made a genial heaven and earth, but never dreamt at dance or dinners that there is a hell to punish sinners. How quick time throws its rapid measure along the path of worldly pleasure. Like a wave that glistens on the shore, retires and is beheld no more. A blast that stirs the fading woods in autumn eves and fading woods. An echo roused on the hill dies on the wind and all is still. A star's reflection in the tide, gathering shadows soon shall hide. Such and so transient the condition of earthly joy with man's ambition. Death steals behind these smiles of joy with weapons ready to destroy. And though 100 years were past, he's sure to have his prey at last. And when that fatal hour is ready, he cares not for the lord or lady, but lifts his gun and snaps the trigger and shoots alike the king and beggar. And thus the herald of our tale is shot as foul as shoot a quail. Amid the flash and pomp of splendour, he made her soul the world surrender, to join her father's awful forms in rolling clouds and swelling storms. And, lest the muse to be a liar, I'm led to think she went no higher. And I also have some secret notion she didn't like her new promotion, for if she did, she would remain and scorn to come to earth again. But earth, the home of her affection, would not depart her recollection. So she returned to flash and shine, but nevermore to dance or die. The story of her resurrection flew out in many a queer direction. Each night she'd move on airy feet from Thomond Bridge to Castle Street. And those who stayed out past 11 would want a special guard from heaven to shield them with the holy wand from the mad terrors of her hand. She knocked through 2 drunken soldiers dead, 2 more with broken foreheads fled. She dashed the sentry box and staves and threw the fragments in the waves. She slashed at gunners left and right and put the garrison to flight. She pitched her reverend lord downstairs, then burned the house about his ears. He levelled all the guns of Luther, aimed and fired, but couldn't shoot her. The devil, for all his faults and failings, was far more quiet in his dealings, notwithstanding all that he lost than this unruly, rampant she-ghost. No pugilist in Limerick town could knock a man so quickly down, or deal an act of blow so ready to floor one as the bishop's lady. And thus the ghost peeled and vanished, until her ladyship was banished by Father Power, to whom things of evil dreaded as mortals dread the devil. Off to the Red Sea shores he drove her, where time and tide cannot remove her, to numbing sands upon the coast that skirts the grave of Pharaoh's host. A lady of her high-born station must have acquired great education in such a clerkship, numbering sands, with no account save her hands. 20,000,001, 20,000,002, 20. But ere the priest removed the lady, there lived a chap called Drunken in Thomond gate of social joys, birthplace of the devil's boys. Thady knew his country's history well, and for her sake would go to hell. For hours he'd sit and madly reason upon the honours of high treason, what bills the house had lately brought in, what croppies nimbly danced on nothing, and how the wily game of state was dealt and played in '98, how Wexford fought, how Ross was lost, and all to Ireland's bloody cost. But had the powers of Munster risen, then Ireland had England by the wizen. He told great tales about those playboys called Terry-Alts and Peep-a-Day boys, who roused at night the sleeping country and terrified the sleeping gentry. And who's to say that Irish history to Thady's breeding was a mystery? Although the parish priest proclaimed him, and first of living devils named him, at heart he was an Irish lumper, but all his glory was a bumper. He believed in God right well, but served no heaven and feared no hell. A sermon on hell's pains might start him, it might convince but not convert him. He knew his failing and his fault lay in the tempting drop of malt. And every day his vice went further, and as he drank, his heart grew harder. Thady, oft the parish priest called he wicked, drunken bish, and said thou art a devil's handle of brazen, barefaced public scandal, an imp without the least contrition at whiskey, discord, and sedition. The drinking was your whole enjoyment, and breaking doors your whole employment. And every drunken caper made windows change their glass for paper. And sure as every Saturday night you set you half the parish fighting. And with your constant boozy quaffing, you broke Maldy and Biddy laughing, and sent those two poor widows begging, without a drop you left their kegging. In vain the priest reproved his doings, but even as ivy holds the ruins, he cautioned, counselled, watched and tracked him, but all in vain. At last he whacked him, and with a blackthorn highly seasoned, he urged the arguments he reasoned. But Thady loved intoxication, and foiled all hopes of reformation. He still rose roused, and he drank the whiskey, and he roared just like the Bay of Biscay. In every grog shop he was found, in every fight he fought around. The treadmill knew his steps as well as e'er a bellman knew his bell. The jail received him 40 times for midnight rows and drunken crimes. He flew at his wife and told her brother, and burned the bed about her mother, because they hid his fine steel pike deep down in Paul Maloney's dyke. The night being dark and the way being narrow, with scarce room for one wheelbarrow, Thady knew that scanty passage well, and headlong his pursuers fell into a stinking miry brook, like birds in birdland sudden stuck. The neighbours said that the devil stealed him, and if the garrison assailed him inside King John's strong castle wall, most likely he'd outdevil all. People all day he drank poteen and hazes, and he damned the king-in-law to blazes, till he knocked a servant on the floor and kissed Miss Lizzie by the door. But ere his meal of pranks went further, his host and he had meal of murder. The window panes he broke entire, and the bottles scattered round the fire. The liquor on the hearth increasing caught fire and set the chimney blazing. Oh, the reverend sage this deed admonished. He said, the congregation were astonished. He said that Thady was an agent sent to it by hell's dark regent, and if he did not show reform, his place and pay would be more warm. His vital threads would soon be snicked, and into a hard days he'd be kicked. And even there he'd not be admitted before the porter he first outwitted, for once he got inside their wall, most likely he'd outdevil all. The people heard the sad assertion, and they prayed aloud for his conversion. While Thady, in the public house, was emptying kegs and rising grouse. For him, the priest prognosticated a woeful doom and end ill-fated. And truth has rarely disappointed the sayings of the Lord's anointed. Yet many one in heaven takes supper, who lived, died a saint, yet lived a sinner. Better far and safer surely to live a saint than to die one purely. Yet ye, so ready to condemn a fellow child of clay like him, try if yourself need no repentance before you pass a bitter sentence. And ere you judge your brother first, remember that yourselves are dust. But if your own conscience tells you then that your own heart is free from sin, then cry with the Pharisees, thank God I am not like that wicked clod. But back to our story of sorrow and joy for Thady, the drunken devil's boy. It was Christmas Eve, and the gale was high. Snow clouds swept across the sky. The flaky drifts came swirling down like feathers flying through the town. The tradesmen chattered over their drop. The merchant closed his busy shop, but all day long a cheery crowd bought Christmas ale with tumult loud. The grocer scored his day's amount. The butcher conned his fat accounts. The farmer left the noisy mart with heavy purse and lightened heart. From every pane a Christmas light gave honour to the holy night. In every house the holly green around the reeded walls was seen, and Christmas logs of oak entire blazed, hissed and crackled in the fire, and sounds of joy from every dwelling across the snowy blast came swelling. The flying week, now dead and gone, saw Thady earn £2 His good employer paid it down, but warned him to refrain from town, censured the devilment of drinking. But Thady, he scorned his sober thinking. He fobbed the coins with spirits bright, to home and master bid good night, and like a pirate frigate cruising, steered the crowded city boozing. The sweet-toned bell of Mary's tower proclaimed our Saviour's nature hour, and many an eye enraptured listened, and many an ear enraptured listened. But that gathered crowd, the charmed people, dispersed from gazing at the steeple, and their homeward tread of departing feet died in echoes on the street. For Johnny Connell, that dreaded man, with his wild rake and Garryowen clan, they cleared the streets and smashed each lamp, and made the watchmen all decamp. At 1:30, the town was silent, except for a row down on the island, where Thady, foe to sober thinking, with comrade lads sat gaily drinking. A table and a pack of cards sat between the four braggards, who, with bumper draft elated, dashed down their trumps, swore and cheated. 4 pints, the fruit of their last game, white foaming to the table came. They drank and dealt the cards about, and Thady turned 15 quid out. Again the deal was Jack Fitzsimons, he turned them up and trumps were diamonds. The ace was played by Billy Mara, but beat with 5 by Tom O'Hara. The queen was quickly laid by Thady. Bill threw the king and jipped the lady. Bill jinked the game, then cried out, "Waiter, bring in more drink before 'tis later." The draughts came foaming from the barrel, but their sport soon ended in a quarrel. Jack flung a pint over Tom O'Hara, and Thady levelled Billy Mara. The cards, they flew in every quarter. The earth and floor was drunk with porter. The landlord ran to call the watch, with oaths half English and half Scotch. The watch came to the scene of battle, proclaiming peace with sounding rattle. The combatants were soon arrested, but Thady got free unmolested. The night was stormy, cold and late. No human form was on the street. The virgin snow choked up the highways, it choked up alleys, lanes and byways. The north still poured its frigid store, the clouds were black and threatened more. The night was starless, moonless all, above the silent world's white pall. A blinding sleet shower hissed and bowed, the distant forest roared and bowed. But Thady felt no hail nor sleep, as home he reeled through Castle Street. The whistling squall was beating on the battered towers of old King John, that guarded once in warlike state the hostile pass of Thomond gate. The blinding shower of icy balls rattled against the ancient walls, as if determined to subdue what William's guns had failed to do. Old Munchin's trees, from roots to pegs, were rocking in their churchyard beds. The holy tombs were wrapped with snow, the angry Shannon roared below. Thady reeled along in slow rotation. The greatest man in Ireland's nation, now darting forward like a pike, will upraise fist and act to strike. Now to stand or fall inclined, now reeling backwards in the wind, now sidelong with the pelting showers, he stumbled by the tall round towers. With nodding head, zigzag feet, he gained the centre of the street, and giddy as a summer midge, went staggering towards old Thomond Bridge. Whose smoking arches brave so clever 600 years that rapid river, and seemed in sooth a noble picture of ancient Irish architecture. And here the startled muse may linger, with tearful eye and pointed finger, to that dark river, once the bed of Limerick's brave defenders dead. There all the glorious hopes she cherished, in one sad hour deluded perished. The fatal drawbridge opened wide, the soldiers coming to the dust tide.
Blood is received each.
Blood received each forward man, the rear still madly pressing on, till all the glories of the brave were buried into turbulent wave. And heroes' frames, a bloodless slaughter, choked up the deep and turbulent woe. Now Thady never gave a thought how Limerick's heroes fell or fought. This night he was in no position for scripture, history, or tradition. His thoughts were on the bishop's lady. The first tall arch he'd crossed already. He paused upon her haunted ground, the barrier to her midnight round. Across the bridgeway, dark and narrow, he peered, while terror drove a narrow cold as the cold wind of October all through his heart and made him shiver. A while he stood in doubt suspended, still to press forward he intended, when lo, just as his fears released him, up came the angry ghost and seized him. Oh, Thady, you are done, alas! The priest's prediction has come to pass. If you escape this demon's clutch, then the devil himself is not your match. He saw her face, grim, large and pale, her red eyes sparkling through a veil, her scarlet cloak half immaterial, flying wild around her person aerial. With oaths it tried to catch her form, 'twas easier far to catch the storm. With her red eyes she held him there, his hands held nothing more than air, her arms
Bye.